Welcome to the Family Brand Podcast. Melissa and I have a new daily...
I'm your host, Melissa Smith. I just felt like saying that.
And do I get to be the co-host?
Yeah.
She's the main host, though, for sure. Melissa is the hero behind the podcast. I don't deserve any credit. We have a new daily ritual, I guess you could call it a routine, and that is every day towards late afternoon, early evening, we love to go over and check out the progress of our house because we're building a home, which we're really excited about. And I'm excited about it, but I would say Melissa is exceptionally excited about it. How long has it been since we've owned a home?
Almost 4 years.
Because we sold our home in Gilbert that we loved to move to Hawaii, and then we've rented ever since. And we've now lived in our small town, Pima, for 2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5. In December, it'll be 3.
And probably for 2 years have had a fully designed home with not just the architectural plans, but even the interior design and everything ready. And just been waiting to find the right piece of land, or were we going to stay here in Pima, or were we going to, move somewhere else? Obviously, we've decided to stay here in Pima. We found some land that we really fell in love with. It's a pecan grove. And so we're building our home, and for those of you who have built a home or remodeled, it's so fun to go over every single day and look at the progress. Or the worst is when you go over and it's like, oh, they didn't do anything today or whatever. So, and the reason we're talking about this is because the way I look at us building that home and the way I look at us buying the land is it's all just a creation. And if you've heard any of our episodes in the past, you know that this is a theme that we talk a lot about in our family, the Smith family, of the Smiths are creators. That's one of our core values. And I really believe it's one of the most powerful aspects of a person's identity that you can have as an individual or as a family or as a team, is that we're creators. Because to me, what that means is we can create anything. And everything is a creation. And just that little simple phrase of saying we're creators, it means to me, it's and I'm capable of it. It's my responsibility to create. I can do anything I want to do. And for me, I really believe that that's also in partnership with God. God is a creator. I'm created in his image. Melissa's created in his image. We're created in his. So I think we're born to be creators. We're born to create, and we're the creators of possibility. And I think it's really easy to lose sight of that. And I certainly, for a long time in my life, completely lost sight of my identity as a creator. And I was just I was a victim to life, and just everything was circumstance and happening to me. And I just think that's so cool that if there's things you want in your life, it's oh, I'll just go create it. And I love acknowledging my kids when they do things. I love specifically using the words, yeah, you created that. You are a creator. And I think it's just such a powerful thing to reinforce to ourselves and to our kids, this idea of, yeah, you're a creator. You're responsible. You're capable. And we're literally creating a home. And it's just a really fun process to experience, I think, creation, but it's really easy to lose sight of it as well.
One thing that I think that I see happening a lot in the world today is I think it's easy to see something that you maybe would like to have or like to do or become. And it's easy to say well, this could never happen for me, or this could never happen for us. I think the way you phrase it is people like to fight for limitation, more than they want to fight for the possibility of, maybe we could do this thing or be this thing or have this thing. We talk more about limitation and possibility.
Yeah. And I think also another phrase that I've said before plenty of times, that's kind of the antithesis of creation, is you see something, you're oh, it must be nice. Must be nice for them or that person or that situation, but that would never happen for me. And so we're either living in limitation or we're living in possibility. And so we're either living in the energy and spirit of creation, or we're living in the energy and the spirit of complaining or limitation. And I think it's really easy to slip into a lot of thinking and talking about what you don't want and what you don't have and what isn't working and what isn't going to work. And then that just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's almost like you never even give yourself the ability to create, which I believe that's your birthright. Like, you were born to create, you're a creator, but it's like you never even give yourself a chance to create, because all of your energy and your thinking and your talking is actually the complete opposite of creation. But if you can start to like even experiment with it, like, okay, I'm going to put a little more energy into what I do want, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to put some energy into what is working, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to put some thought into what I do want, or what I do like and what I do have, and talk about that. That's like stepping into the energy of creation. And I think the reason like creation and going after something and creating and creating possibility feels so good is because I think it's who we authentically are. Like, that's the truth of who we are. So when you're in that feels really good. And then when you're the opposite of that, when you're complaining, or that would never happen for me, or here's what I don't like about my life, and here's all things that are going wrong, that doesn't feel very good, because that's actually not who you were born to be. And a friend of mine, David Bayer, one time, he said something really profound from stage years ago. He said, if it doesn't feel good, it isn't true. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of times it doesn't feel good to complain about things or to focus on what isn't working in your life, because that's not the truth of who you are. And you can either spend all of your energy complaining, or you can spend your energy creating. And I think that when you do create, and it could be anything, and it occurs to you like, wow, I created that, or we created that, or we did that, it reinforces that identity of like, oh, what else could I create? And I think we've talked about like when we moved to Hawaii, for those of you who don't know, we sold everything we owned and moved to Hawaii. And we really did look at it like, oh, we want to do that? Let's just create it. It's just a creation. And we put more energy into why it would work and how we could pull it off and why we did want to do it. We really didn't put a whole lot of energy into like, well, why should we not do this? And maybe we should have even done that more. We were just like, oh, we want to go to Hawaii. We want to sell everything we own and go. All right, let's go. Like, and then when we did that, I think it then gave us the courage to be like, well, what else can we create? What else is possible? Yeah,
we have some questions that we like to ask ourselves. And Chris and I know we're talking about creation here, like how we did this thing and we did this thing. It is still, I feel like, really hard. Maybe it's just human nature. I don't know, to continue to like stay in creation and not go into like that limitation that Chris was talking about, because there's plenty of times where we're basically, I catch us complaining or talk about things that aren't working for us. So I don't want to come onto this podcast and say like, we're so good at this, let us teach you how to do it. Because what?
No, go ahead.
Because the reality of it is like, it is challenging, when you're coming up against, like pushback from, the universe or from your family members or, whatever it is, when things are coming up, it's hard to stay in momentum, like headed towards what you actually want, to keep working towards it.
I also think your mind, like when you have that initial thought of like, oh, I want to go create this. It could be anything, large or small, where your mind's hardwired to keep you safe. So where your mind immediately goes to is like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, here's all the risks. Here's all the things that could go wrong. Here's all the people that are going to have opinions about it. Here's why it probably won't work. Here's how you could get hurt. So it's like your mind isn't going to like on its own, like naturally work. Your mind really wants to figure out, well, hold on, we got to figure out it. We got to know exactly how it's going to work. We got to make sure everyone's going to be going to improve it. We got to take into consideration everyone's opinions. So that's just like your mind's always working against you as well. It's like you have that flash of like, oh, I want to go create this. And then your mind can really sabotage you if you're not careful.
Totally. Okay, so here's one of the thought processes that we like to use when we're faced with something that we want to do. Like, huge example would be moving somewhere else. A smaller example would be like, where should we go for fall break or something? Do we want to do this? Or maybe your family gets invited to go somewhere for fall break. Do we want to do this? And would it be meaningful to us? Would you add anything else?
Yeah, and that's what's so funny about that. It sounds so simple, but we've shared this with so many people, and they've come back and been like, "Wow, that's actually really helpful." And I think the reason Melissa and I came up with this very simple decision-making process is because we used to feel like anytime we were presented with an opportunity by someone else, or anytime we just even had the thought that we wanted to do something, it just seemed like really stressful and discouraging, and we'd talk ourselves out of it, or we'd find all the reasons why we couldn't, or we'd focus on what we didn't want, or it would be like, well, yeah, we do want to do that, but we probably can't, or like we don't know how it would all work. So we never even gave it a chance. Like the second we would come up with the idea of what we wanted to do, we would just as quickly talk ourselves out of it, and it would kill all of the ideas and the opportunities. And so we're like, we've got to have a process that allows us to make a better decision so that we don't just keep talking ourselves out of this, so that we don't just keep like killing creation and possibility before it even has time to like, it's like we'd plant the seed in the ground, and then before it could even start to take any root or like water it, we'd like rip it right back out of the ground. And I don't even know how we came up with this, but it's so simple and it served us so much. And it's that simple. It's like, okay, before we consider anything else, do we want to do it? Now, but again, your mind, if you're not careful, you're going to say yes, but it's like, no buts. Like you don't have to consider anything else right now. It's a really simple yes or no. Do we want to do this? Yes. Okay, great. And again, you're still going to want to like, but how would it work? And it's like, doesn't matter right now. It's just a simple yes or no. Do we want to do this? Yes. Awesome. Would it be meaningful to us? Well, yeah, but again, it's like, no, that doesn't matter yet. There's no reasoning or logic yet. Just, do we want to do it? Yes. Would it be meaningful to us? Yes. Awesome. Then Melissa and I started realizing if we answer yes to both of those questions, then we're a yes. And it doesn't always mean we're in a position to do it right now. It doesn't mean we have everything figured out, or we have the money, or we have the time, but by saying yes, we're now like stepping into the possibility of it happening. Like we're kind of like obeying, I would say, the laws of creation by like looking for a reason why it could happen. Versus what we used to do is just be like, no, we can't do it. Or no, that would never work. Or I don't know how it would work. And we'd kill the idea before it even had a chance. And so we weren't really being creators. We weren't really stepping into the spirit of creation. And I would say a third question for us a lot of times is like, do we want to do it? Yes. Would it be meaningful for us? Yes. And then it's not so much like, how are we going to do it? It's like, well, it's almost like, how are we going to create this? Because I think sometimes if you just ask, how are we going to do it? It almost can lend to like overanalyzing or overthinking it. But how are we going to create it? It assumes it's going to happen. It assumes that it's a possibility, and it just needs to be created. But now you're in this place where you can actually get some downloads and some ideas and some thoughts, and you're stepping into possibility, and you're looking for all the reasons why it can happen versus just killing it from the get-go. So it's super simple, but it's been so profound. Like this home, like, do we want to build a home? Yes. Would it be meaningful for us? Yes. Okay. We're going to build a home. And we don't know the timetable or the time, like, and everything that goes into it and all that, but like, and we may not even be in a position right then to do it, but we know we want to, we know it'd be meaningful to us. So we know that we're going to go create it.
Which, to circle back to the house, we're making it sound like it's been this like kind of linear journey. It hasn't been. Like we've truly had houseplants sitting in my inbox for 2 years, and we just haven't felt like that the location that we kind of had initially chose, that it was the right location, that the timing was the best. So sometimes I think it's waiting too, even though that's like so hard. But I think that's the thing that you're talking about when it comes to like co-creating with God, is that maybe our timing is like, okay, yep, we're doing it now. But then I think that that's another factor too, is like listening to that also, because the place that we are now building our house, although it's taken way longer than I wanted to, it's way better than the first spot that we were going to build our house. And the way that the land like fell into our laps, I totally see like that was a God thing, and it wasn't the right timing beforehand.
Yeah. And I would say, though, for us, it was never a question if we were going to build it. Mm-hmm. So when you say like anything, it's like, do we want to do this? Yes. Would it be meaningful for us? Yes. And then it's like, okay, how are we going to create this? It may not be that it's a linear path or it's smooth or it's easy. Like it actually might be really difficult. And in your mind, though, it's like, but it's a foregone conclusion. Like we know we're going to create it because not just we said it, but also, again, reminding yourself, it's part of your identity of like, I am a creator. You are a creator. We are creators. And I think my tendency, sadly, though, is to forget that part of like, as a creator, I can be a co-creator with God, and God knows more than I know and is smarter than I am. And a lot of times it's like, do I want to do this? Yes. Would it be meaningful to me? Yes. All right. I'm in without maybe even consulting God or asking God to like help us create it. Because a lot of times the things that I may want to do or the timetable I may have may be completely different than God's. And what's so funny too is like a lot of times the answers God might have don't even make sense in the immediate, like right then. And I was talking with someone last week that pointed out something really interesting to me in Samuel, where it basically was talking about David. And he said that he noticed that there was a number of times where the verse of scripture would literally say, David inquired of himself. David inquired of himself. And how many of those didn't go great when he would inquire of himself? And he still like could be like, I'm a creator, right? I can go out and make things happen. And then it showed examples where the literal wording would be David inquired of the Lord. David inquired of the Lord. And how many of those like actually worked out? And then we started talking like, yeah, it is kind of funny sometimes, like the story of the city of Jericho, where God was like, I want you to go walk around the city a bunch of times and blow some trumpets, and it's like, on the surface you'd be like, that sounds insane. Like, it's the dumbest idea ever. Like, what? Why? We're trying to win a war here. Like, we're going to go walk around and blow some trumpets. And then yet, like, they did it, and the city walls fell, and it's like, whoa. But it's like, so I think part of the recognition, I think, of realizing you're a creator, there's also something divine in that like you're a creator, and who are you created by, and who can you co-create with? I don't know. To me, that's just fun. It's fun to just think about like life as a creation. It's like, well, what do I want to create? And I can go create it, and I don't have to create it alone. Like I can create it with amazing people like Melissa or like my kids or business, and also with God. And because I think the opposite of looking at life like a creation is just like, well, life just happens and I'm the victim of the circumstances, and sometimes that works out great for me and sometimes it doesn't. It's like, I'd way rather at least strive to live life like a creation of, what do I want life to be for me?
One thought I had earlier, as it relates to our kids and parenting them in that way. I remember we had someone, we were talking about family check-ins. It might have been like in a family brand, like coaching call for our Family Brand Academy. And someone, so we were talking about check-ins, and one of the questions that we ask in check-ins with our kids is, what's important to you this week and how can we support you this week? And someone said, well, what if your kid comes up with like something so ridiculous, like, you can support me by buying me a bike. They're like, their feedback was, I wouldn't do that. And so like, what do you do if they come up with like a ridiculous request like that? And it did have me pause for a minute and think like, is that a ridiculous request? Like, of course, I'm not going to go buy my child a bike like that week just because they say, you can buy me a bike. But I think this is an opportunity for us to practice this as parents. Like, they are trying to be in creation. Like maybe they want a new bike, or maybe they, fill in the blank with what your kid might be interested in right now. Am I going to like shut that down and be like, no, like you could never, that's too expensive. You could never do that. Or can we get into creation together with our kids and be like, yeah, a new bike sounds amazing. Like, let's go look at bikes this week and see which one you like. Maybe we could ride a couple, you could see how much they cost. And then we can brainstorm, like, how can we earn money for this bike? And to me, that is an example of what this can look like with your kids too.
I love that. And one thing I'd add in there, and again, some people will hear me say stuff like this and they're like, isn't that overboard, or does it really matter? And I really believe it does matter, and that is words. Like, language creates. And so the thing I might add in there is like, when your child comes to you with that, is like, yeah, how can we create that as a possibility? Can you imagine if your child just grows up hearing that kind of language of like, well, eventually it's going to dawn on them like, oh, I create possibility. I am the creator of. And so it's like, yeah, how could we create that? Oh yeah, this is totally a creation. This is an opportunity to create. What do we want to create here? And we do use that word a lot in our family of like creation. Smiths are creators. And I'm just, man, because I think most of my life, the reason I think I'm in love with that so much is because for most of my life, I did not see myself as a creator. And I really still like remember very, very clearly like how it felt to feel like I wasn't a creator, that I had very little power over my life, that I had very little control over like what I wanted. And I was really miserable and kind of like, I was like, oh, it must be nice for them, or that could never happen for me. And then what it felt like to start to step into like, well, maybe I am a creator. And to me, what that also, an underlying message that you almost don't even have to tell your children or yourself is if you're saying I am a creator, if you're saying things like I create possibility, I make things happen, that also has to mean that I'm enough and I have worth and I matter. Like those two things can't be disconnected. You can't say like on one hand, I'm a creator and I create possibility and I'm linked to the ultimate creator, and then also be like, but I don't matter and I don't have any worth and I'm not enough. So it's like, and that's if there's one thing I would want for everyone to have as part of their identity, and I think we all have a unique identity in the beliefs we hold about ourselves, but I would really want every human being that one of the beliefs they have about themselves and in their identity is, yeah, I'm a creator. I can create possibility, because you really can. And so, yeah, but Melissa's so good at that with our kids. And like, I think it's such a fine line, because I think even as parents, we're like, well, no, we're not buying you a bike, or you're not entitled, or we're not going to spoil you, or you've got to be reasonable, but if you can like never see any of their requests as a threat, but it's just like, oh, that's something that's important to you. And maybe even use those questions like, oh, so do you want a new bike? Yes. Would that be important, meaningful to you? Yes. Well, then great. Let's figure out a way to create it. Let's figure out a way to make it happen. And your child might not be stoked on that either. And they might be like, no, I just want you to buy it for me. But like, what a lesson. And like, so I love that example.
And I think that, a lot of those requests that our kids make, they don't even end up coming to fruition because they lose interest or they decide they want something else. But I think it's just the exercise of being like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's go out and create that.
And it is such a more empowering, because your other two extremes are like, you either just say no, or maybe even as dangerous is you might just be like, yes, I'll say yes to every request you make and I'll just buy it. That carries with it its own consequences, but there's this really beautiful middle, which could be like, yeah, let's create it.
My last thought, as you were talking earlier about growing up and feeling like the way that you described, where you feel like you didn't have access to like create what you wanted. I thought, if you're listening to this and you feel like you maybe are not in a place where like you can be the creator in that way that you want to, like do it for your kids so that they can grow up in a home where they can see what's possible and that there's not limitations, and they know that they can have big dreams and they can go for their dreams and go for their goals. And what a cool like space to raise a family in that space, and how like the impact of that as your children grow older and then are out in the world and living their life.
Yeah. Last thing I would say and that's beautiful, Melissa. And I don't know, sometimes I think I don't land the plane very well in these episodes, meaning I stay super high level, and Melissa's the one usually like, okay, and here's one thought that I did have as a practical application of this that sounds so simple, but it will make a difference. Start to acknowledge effort and things that you do as a family or that your children do with the language of creation. So like, let's say you go out and do a big project in the yard. At the end, be like, guys, look what we created. Like, we created that. Like, we're creators. Or your child does a project or, comes home and shares something. It's like, yeah, like, how does that feel? It's like, awesome. How does it feel to create that? You created that. That didn't exist and you created it. You're a creator. I just think that's a really powerful thing to enforce for all of us around our identity. And even for yourself, you do something really amazing, to step back and be like, wow, I created that. I'm a creator. And it doesn't mean you're taking all the credit. Like, you can still give credit to others who helped you or to God, but I think there's something powerful about acknowledging your role in creation and your family and your kids.
It's beautiful. And I think we're a good team, by the way. I don't think that you're too high level. I think that we make a good team. And I love doing the podcast with you. So
You too, Melissa.
thanks for being here this week.
# better together.
Better together.